Welcome, everybody. I am hoping that you've found your way to this webinar easily enough. My name is Zoe Morris. I am the course leader of the Master of Educational and Developmental Psychology Advanced, and it's really wonderful to have you here this evening to discuss this course. We have our wonderful team members, Ivy and Patrick, here from the marketing team of Faculty of Education to answer questions in the chat throughout the session tonight, and there will be time for questions at the end as well. So please do feel free to use the chat throughout and or wait until the end for more substantive questions if you have them. I've got the slides up for now, but we might skip along into the session today to take you through this course. But before we do get started, I do just want to take a moment to acknowledge the lands upon which we are speaking from today and recognise that sovereignty was never ceded. I'd like to specifically acknowledge the Wurundjeri and the Boon Wurrung people, and they are the communities of the Kulin Nation who are the ongoing custodians of the lands upon which Monash University now stands. We pay our respects through our research, teaching and learning to the Wurundjeri and Boon Wurrung elders and their past, present and future communities. And I acknowledge the presence of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who are participating today and who stand to contribute so much to the field of psychology in decolonising the work that we do and working in a way that is culturally affirming and culturally sensitive. So just taking a moment to introduce to you some of the people from the Faculty of Education. So the course does sit in the Faculty of Education, and within the Faculty of Education, we have the School of Educational Psychology and Inclusion. So our Dean, Professor Mary Ryan, who is incredibly passionate about the work of educational and developmental psychology and has a background in literacy intervention as well, is very supportive of this course and our programs. Our head of school is Professor Andrea Roipert, who is a registered psychologist and a previous school psychologist in far north Queensland. And again, we're very fortunate to have a head of school that has on-the-ground clinical experience. It's quite unique to have that. We also have a Director of Psychology and Counselling Programs, Mr. Doug Scott, who is a registered psychologist in clinical counselling and community, I believe, with multiple endorsements. He has some great experience working with Veterans Affairs as a practitioner. And myself, I am an educational and developmental psychologist who did their training at Monash University 20 years ago, and very excited to see how educational and developmental psychology has grown in that time. We do have a beautiful building here, the Learning and Teaching building you can see pictured there. And there's a link for you to explore the teaching staff and the research staff that we have in the School of Educational Psychology and Inclusion. So please do feel free to explore that. I think one of the strengths of this program is that we do have a large staff group, and it really enables our MEDPA students to be taught by a number of different practitioners and educators who are all practitioners, I should say, and endorsed in educational and developmental psychology. And it really adds to the breadth of your knowledge and insights by having different people teach you in this way, which I think is a wonderful thing. So today we will cover a number of topics to help orient you to this course and this area of practice. So we'll be thinking about what is educational and developmental psychology and where you might find one working. We'll talk about the course. The MEDPA is the only course of its kind in Australia. So it's the only standalone course in educational and developmental psychology. And we are certainly thrilled to be hosting that course here at Monash Uni and offering it in a delivery format that enables psychologists across Australia to undertake this course and bring access to many people. We'll talk a bit about the time commitment and the placements, how much supervision you will require in the course, who might be eligible to apply for this course, and how do you apply? And then we'll have the Q&A session. I know we have a number of people watching here today, and it may be that you are much earlier in the pathway of psychology, in your undergraduate or fourth year. You're absolutely welcome to come along tonight. You will learn a little bit more about the educational and developmental psychology field. If you are not a registered psychologist, you can also take the MEDP pathway. But if you are planning on doing the internship pathway, then the MEDPA will be what you would do to gain educational and developmental psychology training. So this course is for registered psychologists, and I'll talk a little bit more about eligibility later. But I do just want to say that whatever stage of training you're at, you're very welcome today and welcome to ask questions as you may be thinking into the future, which is wonderful. In terms of educational and developmental psychology, it's something that I like to think is one of the best kept secrets of psychology, but perhaps no more. We're certainly getting a lot more recognition and growth in this area. But one of my favorite quotes that really draws attention to some of the key distinctives of this area of psychology is this quote from Gilmore, Fletcher, and Hudson in 2013. They in their article, which was a commentary on the current and future status of Ed and Dev Psych back at that stage. And it talks about the strong focus of educational and developmental psychology on prevention as being perhaps its noteworthy feature, that it draws on concepts like resilience, well-being, quality of life, and that educational and developmental psychologists work proactively with individuals and groups, particularly those who are thought to be more vulnerable, in order to prevent that cascade of risk and the development of subsequent disorders that are more difficult to address. So I think this is one of our key distinctives, and it really talks about how we work from a strengths focused perspective, ideally in prevention and early intervention. And in that way, we often will be working with individuals and groups and systems. And the course really reflects these concepts in terms of our distinctives. So I really like that quote in drawing attention to some of the things that make us unique in psychology. Following on that, looking at the numbers of educational and developmental psychologists in Australia, as of September 2025, there were 1,065 Ed and Dev Psychs across Australia. So we are quite unique, and particularly well, we're certainly sought after in all states, but particularly those states that don't have a training program in them. Graduates really do get snapped up by workplaces because your skills are so unique and very difficult to find locally. So we represent about 5.6% of the endorsed psychologists across Australia. We're also growing. So we were the second fastest growing endorsement area in about the last 5 years. And we average about 60 new endorsed Ed and Dev Psychs per year. And currently there are 306 registrars completing endorsement in educational and developmental psychology as at 2026. And recently, the growth that we have had has had educational and developmental psychology move to the second largest area of practice. So there are 9 areas of practice in Australia, and psychology is now the second largest with 1,065. We are second to clinical psychology, which is quite a bit larger, and following closely are counselling and clinical neuropsychology. But it really does speak to the strength of the courses in this area and the strength of interest of students in this area, but also the interest in gaining endorsement and having that identity and skill set as an educational and developmental psychologist. So it's incredibly exciting to see this growth, particularly for the diversity of psychology in Australia. Where do we work? Well, you'll find us in lots of places. I think we are best known for our work in schools and in educational settings, and certainly our skill set is very well suited to that work. But increasingly, we've seen numbers of psychologists with educational and developmental psychology training moving into private practice in particular. I've got some stats later on where I did a survey of over 300 psychologists with training in this area, and about 50% were working in private practice at least some of the time, if not most of the time. So we are seeing quite a significant workforce of educational and developmental psychologists in private practice doing really diverse work, whether it's with perinatal services, assessment of neurodivergence, support and educational assessments, or parenting support. Perhaps a really large component of the survey respondents worked with parents, and also working with adults across the lifespan in transitions and learning and development at every stage of life. So although we're best known for our work with school age clients, we certainly can and do work across the lifespan at different stages. And you can see that reflected in the little infographic I've got there that focuses even on older age as well. And there are units in the coursework that relate to geropsychology and neurodevelopment across the lifespan. But we also see graduates working in disability and inclusion, in government, not-for-profit. We've had some really unique graduates working in IT startups relating to apps and things like that for executive function, for example. So there's certainly a diverse range of roles that an educational and developmental psychologist can do. And I think that we have sort of ties and connections to other areas of psychology. We do work with mental illness, like a clinical or a counselling, and we do work with neuroassessment, like a neuropsych. So we have connected points. We do work with systems, like an org psych. So it has a great diversity of work that you can do, which I think is really exciting in terms of a career focus across your lifespan. In terms of learning more about educational and developmental psychology, there are some really wonderful resources that are out there. We have a recent book called How to Become an Educational and Developmental Psychologist, which was written by a number of ed and devs across Australia and also has contributions from students and supervisees and supervisors with stories from the field across Australia and New Zealand. And it's a very practical book as well. So there's that book there. And there's also a podcast that was recently launched in the last 12 months by the APS College of Educational and Developmental Psychologists. And Subject for Change is the name of the podcast. And they interview lots of different types of psychologists, but including educational and developmental psychologists. So that's a great place to learn more. And there are some other podcast episodes by Ed and Dev Psych, such as We All Wear It Differently, episode 26 with Dr. Chelsea Hyde. So we also have a range of professional membership groups that you can join. So I've already mentioned the CEDP, which is the College of Educational and Developmental Psychology of the APS, but there's also an independent organisation called AEDPA, the Australian Educational and Development Psychology Association. They have some resources for prospective students and some panel sessions that you can watch online about Ed and Dev Psych with other Ed and Dev Psychs. And both of those groups have active social media that you can follow along as well. So there's a wealth of places to go to find out more about educational and developmental psychology if this is a space that you're interested in. In terms of the course that you're here to learn about today, the Master of Educational and Developmental Psychology Advanced. So this advanced program is for registered psychologists, and it is 1 year full-time or 2 years part-time. We have 2 intakes per year. So this current session is for our July commencement, which is term 3. But we do have a January intake as well, with applications due in September for the January intake. So there's some choice about when you start. This program is a standalone program to train in APAC, the Australian Psychology Accreditation Council. They have 4 levels of training in psychology, and this course covers level 4 in educational and developmental psychology. So it gives you that advanced training in this space, and it does allow graduates to be eligible to commence a registrar program for an area of practice endorsement in educational and developmental psychology. So after the 1 year full-time course and the potentially 2 years or less endorsement program, you can call yourself an educational and developmental psychologist, which does give you access to being called upon for various types of work. So increasingly, we are finding guidelines in the space of autism and ADHD do mention our endorsement area as someone who is able to undertake assessments and diagnostic assessments and has skills to do so. It doesn't mean that we're the only people who do, but certainly we are mentioned as a core group of people who can do that work. The course does have placement in it, and the placement hours are 750 hours. If you were full-time, that will be done over that year alongside your coursework units. In that 750 hours, there are 300 contact hours, and I'll talk more about the placements in a moment. But as I've mentioned, this program is only open to only open to registered psychologists. If you are not a registered psychologist and you want to study educational and developmental psychology, then you would, after your 4th year training, you would apply for the Master of Educational and Developmental Psychology, so the MEDP without the A. The one with the A is the advanced, and that's for registered psychs to enter. And it's half the size, it's shorter as a result. So that's just a little bit of clarity point in terms of who is eligible. Oh, this is an even better diagram, perhaps. I am imagining that most of you who are here are graduates or registered psychs who undertook the 4+2 internship or the 5+1 internship. They're the main people who seem to apply for this course. However, we do have some graduates of Master of Psychology programs in other areas of practice like clinical or counselling who are looking to transition into having multiple endorsement area opportunities. So if you did a MPsych or a 5+1 internship here and you are a registered general psych or endorsed in another area, then you are eligible for the MEDP Advanced. If you did a 4+2 internship, there is a requirement of having 1 year of experience as a general psychologist. That comes from APAC and PsyBA, that requirement. Once you've been a registered psychologist at general level for a year, you are eligible also for the MEDP Advanced. So they are the three main pathways to this program. And I've acknowledged earlier that some of you may be further behind, sort of earlier in your career of training as a psychologist, and I've indicated the pathways there for you if you are looking at the Master of Educational and Developmental Psychology Advanced. And as I pointed out before, after the program, you are eligible to commence a registrar program in Educational and Developmental Psychology, which is typically 2 years, and that makes you endorsed and able to use the legally protected title of Educational and Developmental Psychologist. We might come back to that diagram when there are questions later on, and I'm happy to answer any later on. In terms of the course structure, we have quite a neat structure for the 1 year. We have 4 coursework units on the left, 4 placement units on the right, and each of the 4 terms across the year. So terms run for roughly 3 months, January to March is one, April to June is another, July to September, and October to December. So the course does run from January through to December each year, from quite early January to sort of just before Christmas. And so you will be doing, if you are full-time, you'll be undertaking 1 coursework and 1 placement unit in any given term. So 2 units at a time. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that looks in your timetable in later slides. But these are the unit names and the structure of them and the sequence of them. So if you are starting mid-year, you will start in term 3 in July and undertake 5569 and 5263, and then complete term 4 later in the year. Before in 2027, you would start at term 1 and complete those units. So it goes in a circular fashion. So this diagram basically shows that for you and gives additional information relating to the timing of the timetable. So in terms of how much time each week will this take out of my life, and I know some of you will be wondering if part-time or full-time is more appropriate for you and your load, this might help you imagine what it would look like in your life. So for those who are starting mid-year, I'll start at intake 2 because that's the stage we're at in the year now. You will undertake these 2 coursework units, 1 at a time. And for the coursework units, we have weekly classes in the second half of the year. So each week on a Tuesday night, you'll have 2 hours of classes, roughly from 6 till 8 p.m. for your coursework unit. And if you're full-time, you will also once a month have a placement class on a Thursday night for 2 hours. So it means that in the second half of the year, you can imagine that there'll be 2 hours a week for coursework in the evening on Zoom. And if you are full-time, you will also have once a month 2 hours on a Thursday evening from 6 till 8 Melbourne time. So that's the second half of the year. In the first half of the year, we actually have an intensive that involves those term 1 and term 2 units. The intensive goes for 3 days and is in person on campus at Clayton, and it will be held in April in 2027. So because of that 3-day intensive with 1.5 days for each of those coursework units in the first half of the year, that means that you don't need as many classes in the evening during the terms. So in the first half of the year, in the warmer months generally, although up till June and it's pretty cold now, but in any case, in the first half of the year, from January to March and April to June, you'll have fortnightly classes. So there's a little bit less class time in that front half of the year because of the intensive that is for 3 days in April. And it's usually held just after Easter. And whereas in the second half of the year, you'll have weekly classes. And again, if you're full-time, you will have those placement units alongside that. and that will also be once a month on a Thursday, typically. So hopefully that helps. We do have a little bit of variation from the weekly classes at the end of the year so that you're not doing classes all the way up till Christmas. We have some longer classes in weeks 10 and 11 so that there's no classes in week 12 because that's usually around the 20th of December. It just means you can focus on the end of the year and getting ready for your summer break. In terms of what those units cover, I've given you some dot points here to highlight some of the topics that you could expect. They're really interesting units, and there's a nice mix of both assessment and intervention and working with individuals versus working with groups and systems. You'll also note that across the units, they will acknowledge these elements and topics across the lifespan. So we're not just looking at 0 to 25, we really do think about across the lifespan. And in fact, there are a couple of modules in 5569 in term 3 where we have neurocognitive disorders and aging, and in term 2 where we have geropsychology, where we have an educational and developmental psychologist who works exclusively in geropsychology and is quite an expert in the area to teach you about those topics. So that's an exciting inclusion to really cover that across the lifespan. But you can also see that the course covers key topics in educational and developmental psychology, like working with and understanding neurodiversity and engaging in affirming practice for neurodivergent clients, looking at various both DSM diagnostic types of disorders, but also looking at diversities of neurotype. So we have trauma, attachment in there as well, and then things like educational assessments, working in schools and learning, and advanced skills in assessment like cross-battery assessment and Cattell-Horn-Carroll models of assessment as well. For those who are interested more in intervention space and thinking about mental health and mental illness, we have suicide prevention and risk assessment recovered. Although you'll already have skills in that, we do cover that again. But then we have various modalities that are examined, like dialectical behavior therapy, schema therapy, narrative therapy, compassion-focused therapy. And I think these diverse modalities really enable you to work with quite diverse clients, and thinking obviously about culturally and linguistically diverse clients and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander clients too. So some of those modalities are really useful for that, in addition to working with neurodivergent individuals as well. So it gives you a good flexible toolkit for working with diverse individuals and groups and across different systems, not just schools, but thinking about hospitals or organisations as well. Okay, I've mentioned some of these things already, but these diagrams basically just indicate that there's a circular manner in which the units go. They are all taught only once a year, and depending on when you come into the course, that's when you will do those units. So the term 3 and term 4 units are the first units that you would do if you started mid-year. These are the term dates. We wouldn't start typically on the 1st of January. That's the intake. But it would be quite early in January that classes start, so just flagging that, and the same in July if you were coming in at term 3. And just that 3-day intensive on campus. Oh, I should have changed that. It used to typically be in January. I should make that say April. We've gone back to April. We found that students felt very rushed starting a course in January and then coming straight to Monash over the summer, albeit it was quite handy for some students to go to the tennis when they were down here from interstate. But we have moved that to April. Again, we just think that allows for a bit of a calmer start. So I should just change that one word because it's inconsistent with my earlier slide where I did say April 2027. And we've mentioned the 8 units, 1 coursework, 1 placement unit each term for full-timers. If you're a part-timer, the way that it works is that you do your 4 coursework units first, and in the first year, and in the second year, you'll do your 4 placement units. All classes are held in evenings online, aside from the intensive, which is in person, and we use Zoom at this point in time, and typically the classes are held from 6 till 8 p.m. in Melbourne time. So if you're in a different state without daylight savings, just to be mindful of that. In terms of the placements, in this course, as I mentioned earlier, you do 750 total hours of placement with 300 direct client contact hours. So they're the APAC minimum requirements. At Monash, we suggest that means that you do across the 4 units, placement units across the year that I've mentioned, you do 75 hours of contact each term, roughly, and a total of about 165 each term. So even if you were working part-time in your job and that is approved for a placement site, and we'll talk a little bit about where the placements are, that's quite feasible for even part-time workers. And we do find that students who are full-time generally do not stress about the hours. They accumulate quite easily at that rate. So it's not too arduous. Our students do find their own placements in this course, and typically students will undertake their work in their placement in their work context, as long as it meets the criteria for the competencies that are needing to be addressed. So an example of that would be that if you have a private practice role where you only do assessment, you would need to find a secondary location for placement in order to meet the competencies for intervention. But generally, for people who are working in schools and doing both roles, or working in private practice doing both roles, they are typically acceptable settings for the whole 750 hours. In terms of supervision, the ratio of supervision for this course set by APAC is 1 hour for every 15 hours of placement. So looking at the minimum hours of placement, that adds up to 50 hours of supervision across the course. The supervision is organised by students with board-approved supervisors, and there are some rules for how those 50 hours need to look, whether they're individual or group, and whether those hours are provided by an endorsed supervisor in educational and developmental psychology or not. So I'll talk a bit about that more later. And you are able to use some PD in your logbook as client-related hours as well. You can do 24 hours of PD in the course and include that in your logbook. So 750 hours in total, 300 contact hours. It's achievable for even part-time workers, typically in their workplace, with a supervisor of your choosing, as long as they're approved by Monash at a setting and supervisor level. The supervisor doesn't have to be in the workplace, and they can be external to the workplace as well. So you might have a supervisor in mind. This is a handy flowchart to work out if that individual would be eligible to be your supervisor in this course. So the first step is that they must have the Psychology Board of Australia board approved status. You can look that up on the Psychology Board of Australia website. You can do a search for supervisors and check. If they have that, if they don't have that, then they're not eligible and they would need to do the training. It does take about 6 to 9 months. So if you're planning on starting in July, that person would really need to have that accreditation already. But if you're thinking about starting next year, there might be time for that person to do that training. So if they're a board-approved supervisor, we then ask, are they an endorsed psychologist in educational and developmental psychology? Now, if they are, it means that they are eligible to do all of your supervision hours, so the whole 50. If they don't have educational and developmental psychology endorsement, then they can do a maximum of 50%. So a maximum of 25 hours can come from somebody who might be a general psych with equivalent knowledge to Ed and Dev Psychology, or a clinically endorsed psych or counselling. We've had a range of supervisors. They can do 25 of those supervision hours. So if you have someone of that nature who can only do 50%, you do still have to locate an educational and developmental psychology supervisor for the other 50%. Now, 50% of the supervision must be individual as well, and you can choose, if you've got 2 people, you can choose who you do that individual supervision with. There's, it doesn't have to be with the Ed and Dev Psych. So that means 50% of supervision can be group, and certainly that's a more cost-effective way to undertake supervision and allows you to work with peers and learn from them as well. Supervision can also occur on Zoom or teleconference, so that enables you to have a bit more flexibility, and all supervisors and placement settings must be approved by Monash, but generally students find that's not too difficult as long as it meets the appropriate criteria for the competencies that you are trying to develop. So in terms of Monash, we have a really wonderful staff group, and I do look forward to you all being able to meet them at subsequent opportunities. But you can have a look at the website to see a little bit more. We have really diverse interests as a group, which only adds to our teaching and our students' learning. And the other great thing is that we only teach postgraduate psychology courses in this school or faculty. So we're very privileged to be able to have all of our staff members be registered psychologists, many of them endorsed in one or more areas, and many of them undertaking really applied research that applies to practice as well. So, and lots of supervisors on staff to provide support in those placement units as chief examiners and university-based supervisors. So it's a really wonderful thing to be able to have such a big group contribute to your learning and development, and very passionate practitioners that we have here. So it's definitely one of our key strengths. We have a philosophy here in this course that really connects to the Monash motto of Ancora Imparo, which means I am still learning. What's really great about the MEDPA is actually we learn from the students too, because you're colleagues and practitioners and we learn from you, but you also learn from each other. We've had students with experience of ranging from 1 to 16 years in this course and working across a whole heap of different sectors and with different client groups. And the classes are just as much about practitioners sharing their insights and shared knowledge as the teaching staff sharing theirs. So it's a very collaborative approach, and it really acknowledges that no matter how much experience you have or how little, that everyone is still learning new things and here to do that. Really, we're looking at an approach to learning that involves a flipped classroom. So while you only have the 2 hours of classes weekly in the second half of the year, you are doing work outside of those classes to read and prepare for those classes, so that when you're in those classes, we can break into triads and do some counselling work. We can also do some case study and applied learning and problem solving with real case studies as well. So doing the classes are not the only work that's involved in this course, so there will be some time that you need to set aside to do your reading, but we do have just that one coursework unit at a time, which enables you to really focus on one thing at a time, which is great. It's very collegial, collaborative, as I mentioned, and we really encourage you to take advantage of the opportunities that Monash has. So some of the resources that we have for students includes our Monash test library, which is exceptional in terms of its coverage, and students really enjoy borrowing tests from the test library. And if you're interstate during the intensive, students will get an opportunity to play with the tests from the test library at that point. And we have some online tools available for our students as well. The other thing we have is a really wonderful actual library where we have so many books and resources that you can download and save and read. It's incredible. So yeah, a good opportunity to take advantage of the Monash network of alumni and the resources that we have in our test library and libraries and our staff. Now, I'm conscious of time, so I'll race through because I'd love to give you an opportunity to ask questions, and we're almost done at this point. In terms of the entry requirements for this course, you must have general registration as a psychologist. So there's actually no grade requirements in this course because it is an advanced training course. Those grade requirements tend to sit with the courses that enable you to become a generally registered psych, but you already are. So we're really interested in you meeting obviously the minimum language requirements, having general registration that is current, and completing a supplementary form to indicate that you've maintained your knowledge in ethics and a few other areas and your motivations to do this course. And there are some referee reports required via a Google form. In terms of the closing date for applications, they close on the 2nd of May for term 3 entry in July. But if you would prefer to start in January, your applications will be due in mid to late September this year for commencement in January. So I've probably conveyed a few of these things already, but obviously I'm a little bit passionate about Ed Dev Psych, and I know that my colleagues are too. Certainly, when I did the study of educational and developmental psychologists last year, I did ask people what were the strengths of educational and developmental psychology. If I get time, I'll show you a slide later. But the strongest thing that came through was the really strong sense of community and belonging that happens in this area of psychology. We really do know a lot of each other because there's only 1,065 of us, and we're very much connected both in online environments, at regular conferences. We have, an excellent network of alumni from Monash. Over 500 people have graduated from this course just even in the last 10 to 12 years. So we have, a great network of people, and people really do feel connected and that they belong in this area. Really positive employment prospects with training in this area, and we have graduates working in incredibly diverse and exciting roles. It offers the opportunity to work in prevention and early intervention, as well as working with mental health or mental illness. Very transferable skills to industry. And I've mentioned about people who worked for startups and others that have worked for multinational companies doing organizational well-being work as well. So very transferable skills in evaluation, implementation, and the like as well. That sense of belonging, I think I've repeated that actually. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. International opportunities. So we have great connections in the UK and New Zealand. So if you're thinking about moving to the UK, for example, we've had a number of graduates who have been given educational psychology registration in the UK based off training in this course, which is wonderful. New Zealand also has some trans-Tasman pathways to become an educational psychologist in New Zealand. We have very strong assessment and diagnostic skills. We're very well known for those, but certainly we also get to work in intervention and supporting diverse communities, particularly from a strengths-based and trauma-informed and neurodiversity affirming approach, and the opportunity to also work at that systems level to really impact community and organisations and groups. So it's an incredibly exciting area. Now we do have a QR code where you can get a shortcut to a link in terms of how to apply and look at our course details online there as well. But hopefully that information that I've shared with you today has been useful insight as a starting point. And I will throw to questions at this point in time, and I'm really happy to open that up. Now, I have not had the Q&A open throughout, but I can see we've got one question there, and you're welcome to take a moment to look at writing your question there. Thank you to our attendee who's written the first question. They've looked at the course handbook, but there does not appear to be any tests or exam through the course. Is this correct? That's a great question. We don't have any exams in the MEDPA. We do have a collaborative multiple choice quiz platform that we use in some units called PeerWise. Now, it's not a high stakes test. It's a platform that allows you to create your own multiple choice questions from the readings that you've done for your peers, and then you answer your peers' questions as well. So it's more collaborative and it's more about shared learning, but it's not a high stakes quiz by any means, but it does have marks associated with it across the term. But no, there are no exams. Any other questions? Excellent. Great question. Melanie, thanks for asking. I've got another slide here, and you've just preempted it. For those who are thinking about applying for the course and are thinking ahead of time, knowing that your placements could start in July or January next year, there are a number of places that you can go to find supervisors. We do find that students don't have too much trouble. About 42%, almost half of educational and developmental psychologists are registered supervisors. So there's about 500 in Australia. And because you can do it on Zoom, it means that there's quite a good network, even of our alumni who are able to supervise. We have some places that you can go to look at directories of supervisors through the Psychology Board of Australia, AEDPA, CEDP. There's also a new independent Find a Supervisor website that's run by STAP, I believe. And then we have, if you are already a Monash alumni, when you're a student, you can join this alumni group for current students. So as soon as you get accepted, you can join this group and you can put a call out to our alumni through there. And there's also a Facebook group. Once you're in the course, you can join. And that's an independent Facebook group where a lot of people put call outs for supervisors as well. So lots of opportunities there. Now, if you're still having trouble, we have a wonderful professional experience advisor, Dash Jaya Surya, who will communicate with you and support you to connect you with a supervisor if you've not been able to find one through those pathways. But we find that very few students need to do that. Thanks for that question, Melanie. Great one. Okay, other than exams, what can we expect in terms of assignments? That's a great question, Jennifer, and I probably should have put some more detail on there. Our assignments are as applied as possible. So I know for 5572, which is the systems and groups unit, you actually do pick a intervention at tier 1, 2, or 3, so at universal or otherwise level, and you look at the evidence base for that intervention. So let's just say an interesting one that some students choose is zones of regulation. And then you get to look at the literature and evaluate the literature to look at how much of an evidence base underpins that. And you get to write a little fact sheet for your peers about the research and evidence base of that program, or lack of, as it may well be, in this particular case, which is sometimes surprising for students. And you get to share with each other the different handouts that you create, all on different interventions, because you have to choose a unique intervention. So that's an example of one assignment that's more intervention focused and evidence focused. But then there are other assignments that are ones where you will record a session of you providing feedback to an assessment, or of you doing a counselling session, and you might write a reflection on that session and then submit both the session that you did and your reflection. There are assignments that are more about writing reports, and you get feedback on those, which is great. So yeah, they're quite applied tasks in the main, whether they are actual demonstration of skills or working with a case study and providing a response to that, doing some reflection, doing some quizzes that are not high stakes on the readings to ensure you keep up with those readings. So yeah, that's quite diverse. We like to diversify our assessments and make sure that we assess different types of competencies and different skills across the course. That's certainly one of our goals. So it's not all going to be the same. Sometimes you will be able to use AI even to create something, and then you might critique and edit and build upon that thing that you've created to improve it and make it a bit more human. But I think, learning some skills with AI is part of competencies of students these days as well. Okay. Does finding a supervisor result in an additional financial cost to students? Yes. So supervision, you may have a supervisor in your workplace, and it may be possible for you to have that incorporated into your job in some way. So some students do not have to pay. Some students do pay, and it's a private arrangement between you and that supervisor. That's why some students will do the 50% of supervision as group to reduce costs, because group supervision is often cheaper. So you could offset the costs in that way. And some people will choose different supervisors who may have different fees to offset costs. But the funds that you do pay for supervision are a tax deduction, as you are a registered psychologist. So there are some layers to that enable you to put that through your tax return, which is beneficial. And I believe some people have put their course fees as part of a tax deduction. But obviously, I'm not providing tax advice here, but I have heard people mentioning around professional development and courses, and supervision being things that they can explore as being potential tax deductions. So it does mean that there is sometimes a fee that people will pay for supervision, but that does vary from supervisor to supervisor and the nature of the supervision, if it's group or individual. But some people and a number of students do have it included in their workplace. But it's a great question, and certainly a really practical one to be thinking about. Thank you for asking that. Okay. Any other questions from people? We've got a little bit of time. Oh, great. I'm loving the flow of questions. Thank you. It's delightful to have them coming through. How manageable is the workload when looking at full-time study versus part-time? That's a really good question. It will be different for everybody, and I know that some people will have caregiving responsibilities or jobs that are perhaps, do involve some outside of hours work. We do have a number of students doing the course full time. And I guess in the context of a manageable outside of study and work life, that may be possible. But if you have additional layers or accessibility needs that maybe mean that some things might take you a bit longer in terms of your reading or studies, um, part-time can be a really good option. The wonderful thing is that you can start full-time and go part-time at a point. You some I think it's more common for students to start full-time and move to part-time. It's less common for students who are part-time to go up to full-time because there's usually a reason why people have chosen that enrollment. But certainly, the only tricky thing is that um, if you're full time and you do a placement unit, then you'd have to stop your placement and start it later on. You'd have to do your coursework before you do your placement. So moving from full time to part time does mean dropping a placement. It means you would still keep your coursework unit. So it can be nice to start part time and then maybe add placements on later. We do have some people do that, a small number, where they'll start with the coursework and then add a placement halfway through. And then, once the coursework's finished, they've just got two more placement units to do. So, yeah, it's quite flexible in that sense. And we work with students when they need to change their enrollment. But we have had people be full-time workers and do the course full-time, but I guess it really depends on what else is in the bucket of life. Is there a research report or thesis requirement in this course? Great question. The APAC accreditation standards in psychology outline that research is a competency at level 3 under the current standards. So that means that at 2 and 3, should I say, the fourth year thesis is done. And if you've done a 5+1 or a 4+2, there's knowledge in research that's included in that. So you don't have to do a thesis in this course, which is a wonderful benefit. It means that you've done your fourth year one, and that's sufficient in your training as a psychologist. So there's no thesis or research report, though you will note that in that systems unit in term 4, the assignment is quite research focused, but it's more practical. It's about absorbing research outcomes, looking at the quality of research and thinking about what that means for practice as to whether or not you would recommend using a particular intervention in a given setting. So I think it's a very applied approach to research, which is exciting. And we do have some topics on implementation science and on evaluation in this course. So there's still an alignment with evidence and research, but you don't actually have to undertake research. For people who are interested in undertaking research, it is possible to undertake a PhD after an MEDPA as a separate course. If you have a burning idea for a larger research project, that would be a 4-year full-time PhD after the MEDPA. Okay, contact hours, not a problem, Jennifer. Okay, so the contact hours, I might just go back to that slide if it will go backwards. Let's see. A nice little neat slide here with it. Maybe not. So if you are full-time, and your question was, okay, so we've got the coursework units have, yes, the 6 to 8 p.m. weekly or fortnightly, beautifully summarized there in the question. The placement units, which are the other 4 units that a full-time student will do in year 1 or a part-time student will do in year 2, they have a monthly online group reflection session for 2 hours. So it means that if you're part-time, in the first year, you'll have fortnightly, then weekly classes across the first and the second half of the year. And in the second year, you'll only have classes once a month with group reflections with a university supervisor. So that's not too bad. In addition to that, there may be some time in reading and writing assignments that you'll need to set aside, and the 3-day intensive in April. And that was it. Any further questions? Okay, so if there's no further questions, I might just, oh, thanks, Jennifer, that's lovely. Just move to the final slide again, where we had that QR code if anybody needs it, or that web link. And you're most welcome to reach out to me if you have any questions as well, zoe.morris@monash.edu. And I'm happy to answer anything that comes to mind later this evening. But certainly, this is a really exciting course. It's being built for practitioners who are already working in the field. And I think that it's been really exciting to see our graduates go on to take on more senior roles or new roles in the profession after undertaking this course. And we also have an exciting change at the APRA level at the moment with the substantial equivalence pathway. So another benefit of this course is that we're actually finding graduates of this course are being approved that this course is substantially equivalent to a clinical postgraduate psychology program because of the content that it has. And for some people, as they exit this course and apply for that substantial equivalence of this course to a clinical course or other areas, but majority do request it in clinical, they're actually undertaking dual endorsement as a result. And so what they do is when they've finished the MEDPA, they apply for substantial equivalence of this course, and they then undertake a registrar program in educational and developmental psychology and clinical psychology at the same time. So a wonderful benefit of this is that, it's showing that the connection of our work to clinical practice and recognizing those advanced skills as well, which is really exciting. And it kind of means that, the one course can potentially give you multiple outcomes as a practitioner as well. So this is a really exciting development that's only happened in the last couple of years. And I've definitely heard from a couple of grads who have been successful with their applications. And for some of them who have a vast amount of experience when they go into the MEDPA, some of them are actually getting equivalence of an area of practice immediately as well. So yeah, it's a very individual assessment and it's a very new area, but certainly it's worth exploring if that's something that you're interested in or you're deciding between areas. There are these different opportunities that can happen from this one course. So that is something exciting to look at for the future. But I wish you well with your deliberations, and we'll host another session in September that will largely cover these topics again. But otherwise, if you've got questions in the meantime, you're welcome to email, and I'm wishing you a wonderful evening ahead. And we hope to see some of you in the course in July or January. So wishing you well with your applications.